Hi guys, how you doing? Welcome back to St James's Park. The day before Newcastle's return to Premier League action. It's been, well, in some ways it's been a long 2 weeks. In other ways it's been pretty quick and it's flown past. I was up at Hampden last week for the Scotland-Norway game, so I feel like I've just kept working. But I was just speaking to my cameraman earlier and we were saying it's 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks since we worked together. So yeah, it's been nice to get a little bit of a break, but I think for Newcastle and Eddie Howe, it probably hasn't felt like a break because they've been working furiously on the injured players, trying to get them back. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to firstly touch on the injury situation, and then after that we're going to go into a little bit more at length about the related party loan vote, which obviously went through in Newcastle's favour earlier this week, what that means for them. And I'm going to look at a few players who I think could be players that Newcastle could potentially be looking at for January to bring in on loan. Eddie Howe said today that it is perhaps an avenue they will look at, but again, it all depends on the injury situation. So I'm going to go through 5 players who I think Newcastle could be looking at in this video. But before that, quickly on the injuries, I've got them noted down on my phone here. I make it 9, potentially 10 players out for the visit of Chelsea tomorrow. Of course, Sandro Tonali is suspended. Lewis Hall is ineligible. And then the injury list: Dan Burns, Sven Botman, Harvey Barnes, Callum Wilson, Jacob Murphy, Matt Targett, and Elliot Anderson. Add to that Sean Longstaff, who is a doubt, sounds like probably isn't going to play tomorrow. And that means Newcastle are without, if Sean Longstaff doesn't make it, 10 players for the visit of Chelsea tomorrow. And then come PSG on Tuesday night, only Hall would be back available and potentially Longstaff. So it's pretty much the same squad. So look, Newcastle down to the bare bones, and it's pretty overwhelming, I think, when you look at the next 4 or 5 weeks. Up until Boxing Day, in 32 days' time, Newcastle have 10 games. So a game every 3.2 days. And they're going to have to do it with the same sort of 13, 14 players, praying and keeping their fingers crossed that there's no more injuries. So look, not ideal, but good news, I suppose, on the flip side of that Miguel Almiron is back following his injury picked up at Bournemouth, and he'll be available for tomorrow, and so too is Alexander Isak. Newcastle have missed a centre forward in the last couple of weeks, so Isak likely to come in, I would imagine, to the starting 11 against Chelsea tomorrow. I doubt he'll last the 90 minutes, but I think needs must for Newcastle, and I think Isak comes back in. So Isak and Almiron back, but as I say, a whole raft of injuries, the suspension to Tonali, and obviously the ineligibility of Lewis Hall. So that's the injury situation. That's the bad news, but I think Eddie Howe's getting used to that. Because of the injuries, we then, of course, asked them about the plans for January, and Eddie says that, you know, they'll take it game by game, week by week. They might have to be reactive. It depends what players get back when. He said that we could be a whole different picture come the start of January because we might have a lot of these players back. But with the vote going in Newcastle's favour during the week, I think it'd be remiss of them not to look into using the loan situation in January, and I think that they will do that. I don't think they're going to bring in loads of players, but I think they might look to bring in 1 or 2 loan players from the Saudi Pro League, players who play for the 4 clubs owned by the PIF. So these are the 5 players who I think Newcastle could be looking at with regards to a loan deal to the club in January. Okay, so player number 1 I'm going to talk about is the obvious one. We've been speaking about him for a number of weeks now, and it's Ruben Neves, the Al Hilal midfielder. Of course, signed for £47 million from Wolves in the summer. A surprise transfer, you know, a player 26 years old at his peak, just coming into his peak years, going to Saudi Arabia. But look, I think it's fair to say he was probably looking at it as a lucrative thing for him on a personal point of view at the time. But in terms of all the players who are in the Saudi Pro League at those top 4 clubs owned by the PIF, I still think this is the most likely one to happen for Newcastle in January. I think firstly because of his age and profile, I think it's perfect for the project in Newcastle. Eddie Howe told us reporters just 2 weeks ago that he's a player that they have looked at while he's been in charge at Newcastle, and is a player that he likes. Now, while he said that they'd previously looked at him and they haven't this season, he's clearly still on the radar. And when you take into consideration the fact that Sandro Tonali is going to be out for the next almost 10 months with his suspension, you look at someone like Ruben Neves as a perfect replacement for Sandro Tonali. Very similar type of player, uses the ball well, experienced, international. Oh, he's got 45 caps for Portugal. As I say, only 26 years old. And crucially, I think for Eddie Howe, he knows the Premier League. He's played for Wolves for a number of years and excelled in that Wolves team. Now, while he's not someone who's going to come in and win Newcastle the Premier League, I think he'd be a great foil for Tonali, who of course is missing for the rest of this season. And you know, when Eddie Howe was pressed on it a couple of weeks ago at his press conference, he says, look, he was asked whether he's a pressing player, whether he's someone who can play the Newcastle way, high energy, high tempo, high press in your face. And he says, look, I think he can do that. So it's clear to see that he's a player that Eddie Howe likes and has looked at previously. I think there was a story in The Athletic earlier this week saying that he's happy at Al Hilal and he's unlikely to move in January. But look, I think if Newcastle made the call to PIF and said, look, this is a player that we like, you would think that there's a chance they could make this one happen. As I say, he's got that experience having played in the Premier League with Wolves, and you would imagine with the kind of character he is, he would fit in seamlessly into Eddie Howe's side. Look, Newcastle haven't looked yet. They haven't looked at January, and I don't think they will, and maybe until the next few games are out the way. But I think if January ticks on and Newcastle are still missing players in midfield, we know Elliot Anderson's out. Lewis Miley, the youngsters, had to come in and play recently. Joe Willock's just coming back. I think if they're still in a position where they are a little bit short in midfield, I think Neves would be an obvious one to look at. And it's pretty clear why everyone's talking about him and he's the name on everyone's lips. So I think of all the players currently playing in the Saudi Pro League who play for one of those top four clubs owned by the PIF, I would say Ruben Neves would be the one, in my opinion, most likely to join Newcastle in January on loan. Okay, player number 2. Now, this isn't a player that I've got any information on that Newcastle could be looking at, but he's a player that, if you put everything together, I would not be surprised if he's one that would come into the thinking in January. And it's Gabriel Vega, the attacking midfielder, formerly of Celta Vigo, young Spanish midfielder who plays for Al Ahly, the team that Alan Saint-Maximin also plays for. What a talent this guy is. Some of the biggest clubs in Europe, you've been watching him for some time, and I think it came as a massive surprise actually in the summer when Gabriel Vega decided to move to the Saudi Pro League, when he had, you know, massive clubs, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Manchester City, all watching him. I think Newcastle have previously watched him as well. In fact, I think he's actually been linked by Fabrizio Romano, the Italian journalist, to Newcastle in the past. Now, while I was told at the time it was a player Newcastle weren't in for, I wouldn't be surprised if he has been watched by Newcastle. He's young, 21 years old, attacking midfielder, can do a bit of everything, carries the ball so well. If you watch the clips of him on YouTube, like, he carries the ball well. He's got a great shot, great finish. He kind of looks in that Joe Willock type mould, and you know, he was someone you would imagine would fit well into this Newcastle team. The flip side of it is he's been playing in the Saudi Pro League for the last 3-4 months, and you have to question what his fitness levels are like. Is he up to the speed to come in and play in the Premier League? Of course, he's never played in the Premier League before either, so that would kind of work against him, you would think. But as far as young, exciting talents, European talents coming through the ranks are, he's right there. He's right up there with some of the best of them. And if Newcastle could get someone like him, providing he's up to speed, on loan in January until the end of the season, you can imagine him, you know, potentially making an impact on Eddie Howe's side. He's yet to play for Spain. He's only been capped by the 21s, but by all reports, he's going to be a stick-on for the Spain national team in years to come. One interesting thing that was said in the summer when he signed for Al Ahly, Toni Kroos, the Real Madrid midfielder, said it was an embarrassment because he knew that so many big clubs were looking at this young talent, and he felt it was a waste of his ability going and playing in the Saudi Pro League. But I think from what I heard, he is earning 10 times what he was getting at Al Ahly before. So perhaps definitely it's a financial decision for Gabriel Vega. But you know, if he's able to still get those wages, and Newcastle managed to strike a loan deal on whatever it is, a fraction of those wages, a small portion of those wages, that would work in Newcastle's favour. So you can imagine him coming into the team and, you know, playing in the role that Joe Willock or Joe Linton does, and just giving Eddie Howe an option in the second half of the season. He might not be a regular starter, but I think to have someone of that ability around the place would give the rest of the players a boost and would really help with their push towards the end of the season. So that's number 2, Gabriel Vega. Again, as I say, a I'll reiterate that's not gone on any information I've had, but just looking at the players available to Newcastle, knowing the sort of player that Eddie Howe likes, I wouldn't be surprised if he features high on their wish list with regards to loan players from Saudi. Okay, number 3 is a very obvious one for me for a number of reasons, and it's the former Manchester City defender Almer Laporte. Again, massive surprise for me when he decided to go over to Saudi. We saw the likes of Roberto Firmino and Sadio Mane going out there. These guys are in their 30s now, and N'Golo Kante is another one. Karim Benzema, we saw that. But I think for Laporte, a guy who's still in his peak years, 29 years old, Spanish international, to go and play in the Saudi Pro League was a surprise, and I think was a bit of a game changer really when you saw someone of his ability. Yes, he was beginning to be pushed out of the team by Manuel Akanji, and of course since then Man City have gone on and bought Josko Gvardiol, who plays in that left back position coming into the central midfield that Pep Guardiola likes. But you would like to think that Laporte's still got enough football in his legs to play, whether it be in the Premier League or La Liga or Serie A. You'd like to think he's still got a couple more years left, 2, 3, 4 more years before he makes that move to Saudi. But listen, he's made the move there. Of course, he's playing for Al Nassr, the same team that Cristiano Ronaldo and N'Golo Kante play for. And this is a player with vast experience. He's won 5 Premier League titles with Manchester City. He's won, I think, 3 league cups, 2 FA Cups. Of course, he's won the Champions League and the Super Cup as well. So I think he's won 12 trophies in all at Manchester City. He's done the lot. He's capped by Spain. As I say, won the Champions League. This is a high-end player. Uses the ball brilliantly from the back, very similar in mould to what Fabian Schär is, and the right-sided central defender. And obviously the main thing is Sven Botman is injured at the moment. We don't know when he's going to be back. Eddie Howe said today they're still nursing it. It sounds as though it could potentially be long-term. He could be back in a couple of weeks. He could be back in a couple of weeks and then break down again. It sounds as though they don't really know at the moment, and it's a big concern for the club because, as we know, Botman is crucial to Newcastle's plans. One of their key players, if not, in my opinion, arguably their most important player, that left-sided centre-half. What he's brought to the team since arriving from Lille a year and a half ago has been immense, and I think they've missed him. While Jamal Lascelles has come in and done really well, I think just having that natural left-sided centre-half has kind of cost Newcastle in certain situations. And that's why I think Laporte, with his Premier League experience, he knows the league, he's coasted through it before, he's left-footed. For him to come in until the end of the season and allow Newcastle to get to the bottom of this issue with Sven Botman, for me it would be a no-brainer to get someone like Laporte in. Whether it can be done or not, we must wait and see. But I just think what he brings in terms of experience, his use of the ball, his know-how, and if Newcastle were to bring someone like him into the squad who's won all these trophies, who's won the Champions League, it would give them a real shot in the arm for the second half of the season. So I may not have said that if Botman was still fit, but with Botman injured, I just think Laporte at 29 years old, with everything that he's got that I've alluded to already, would be a no-brainer, and for me he has to be one that Newcastle are looking at in January. Okay, the 4th player on my list, this one's a little bit for left field. Some people might not have heard of him, but it's Roger Ibanez, the central defender who plays for Al Ahly, the same team as Gabriel Vega and also Alan Saint-Maximin. This is a player who can play centre-back or centre midfield. He's only 25 years old, moving to the Saudi Pro League at a young age from Roma, from Jose Mourinho's Roma side at the time. And again, a surprise one, I think, over in Italy that he decided to go to Saudi. But you would guess, again, due to the finances and the riches that are on offer over in the Middle East. But, he is a player who can play a couple of positions, as I say, centre-back or centre midfield. Demiral, his defensive partner for Al Ahly, is another one that there could be an argument for. But I just think Ibanez, with his ball playing ability, he can play centre-back or centre midfield. He's a Brazilian international. He comes through the ranks at Fluminense, and you could imagine him settling in well here in Newcastle with his compatriots Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton at the club. So they maybe try and put a word in his ear, but this is a player who you think at 25 years old isn't going to be in the Saudi Pro League forever. It's probably only there for a short amount of time, and if Newcastle were to look into potentially securing a loan deal for him. He could be someone that could add something for them in a couple of positions between now and the end of the season. Obviously struggling a little bit with Tonali missing in midfield, and defensively with only Cher and Lascelles as the current central defensive options. Obviously Paul Dummett can play there as well and has done so very well, of course, in the Cup this season. But I've mentioned Aymeric Laporte already. For me, he would be the number one choice for a central defender. But if Laporte weren't an option, or maybe wasn't a player that Eddie Howe and the Newcastle hierarchy like, then Ibanez certainly ticks a lot of boxes. Big, physical, imposing defender, good on the ball. As I say, can play a number of positions, and he's Brazilian. And let's be honest, Newcastle have had pretty good fortune with the Brazilians recently in the shape of both Bruno and Joe Linton. So, yeah, big surprise that when he went there in the summer for Roma. Young player, certainly far away from being over the hill, and he could be someone who could have a part to play. Okay, my last one is, it was between two. I know a lot of people will be asking about Alan St-Maximin, because obviously he's played at Newcastle and just joined Al Ahly in the summer, but I just feel that for him to be loaned back immediately, I'd be surprised. He was only used sparingly by Eddie Howe anyway, so I would be surprised if Alan St-Maximin came back to the club. But the player I'm going to mention here is another former Newcastle player, and it's Alexander Mitrovich. Of course, remember he signed for the club back in 2015. He was just 21 years old at the time. He's matured a lot since then, scored for fun for Fulham, for Serbia, and is now doing the same for Al Hilal over in the Saudi Pro League. And with Newcastle having problems in attack, injuries to both Isak and Callum Wilson, I feel that they probably need another striker there. And this is a guy who we know can score goals. We know knows the club. We know he's a supporter of Newcastle United. He loved his time here, despite the fact it didn't really go for him. I remember him getting a number of sendings off, and he probably felt like he didn't have the luck. Well, he's had plenty of luck and fortune and ability at Fulham, and then of course with his national team. And while he might not be the typical Eddie Howe type striker, he was actually talking today about what he looks for in a striker, and he says he looks for three things. He looks for hard work, he looks for pace, and he looks for goals. Now, while Mitrovich has probably got he's certainly got the goals, he's maybe not the hardest working or the quickest. He may be someone who could come in and be an option to Isak off the bench, or an option to Callum Wilson once he's back. Someone like Mitrovich coming on for the last 20 minutes in a European match, or even here in any match really, would be a real handful for any Premier League defender. Just look at his goals record. I think he scored 110 goals in 190 games for Fulham, so way better than a goal every 2 games. And similar for Serbia as well, 57 goals in 87 games. So he's carried on that brilliant domestic form on the international level as well. And he's 29 years old. He's still in his prime. He may feel that at Newcastle, where, as I say, he loved his time here, he may feel he's got unfinished business, not just with Newcastle, but in the Premier League as well. Although he kind of forced his move to Al Hilal in the summer, I don't think he was desperate to leave Fulham. He just wanted to go because he knew it was a financially lucrative move for him. So it'll be interesting to see, because, again, I don't think he's an Eddie Howe type striker in terms of what he offers, but I think that the goals might sway it. And, Eddie Howe said a number of times he likes to bring in players who know the Premier League, who know their way around the division, who know how to handle themselves. And Mitrovich knows exactly how to do that. And, I think if it was between him or St-Maximin potentially coming in, I would suggest that the one who ticks more boxes at this stage and would look more likely would be Mitrovich. But of the 5 players I've mentioned, I think he's probably the least likely. But with Newcastle in need of another forward, and I don't see Newcastle going down the route of Cristiano Ronaldo or Karim Benzema. Someone like Mitrovich, who's played in the league before, could be a good option for them. And as we know, scored for fun. So that's my 5. There's obviously plenty of other players. Feel free, you guys, to comment on who you would like to see Newcastle look at or potentially bring in. I think I want to add at this stage, I don't see Newcastle bringing in a raft of them. I don't think they can actually bring in 5 anyway. But I think it'd be remiss of the club not to look at bringing in 1 or 2 loan deals from Saudi in January and make the most of this window of opportunity, I'm going to call it, while it's there, because it's probably not going to be there forever. but there's an opportunity for them in January. So those are my 5 that I would, if I was the Newcastle hierarchy or the Newcastle manager, would be on my wish list, given their abilities and the boxes that they tick. Feel free to comment below, let me know what you guys think, and looking forward to getting back to action. As I say, 10 games in the next 32 days. It's going to be pretty crazy, but looking forward to it. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done already, and as I say, leave some comments below. Cheers for now.